Greetings, all my beautiful African people all around the world. Greetings to you.
Now, Africa.
So this is your World War III update, and I want you to look at what's on your screen right now because this is a map that I think tells you everything you need to know about where we are heading, and most people are not paying attention to it. We've got the Strait of Hormuz still functionally closed. We've got NATO assets repositioning across Eastern Europe. We've got Chinese naval exercises that I think most of the Western press has criminally underreported. And then you've got this ceasefire that everybody's pretending is still alive. It's not alive. It's on life support, and somebody already unplugged the machine. So what I want to do today is walk you through what I think is actually happening, not what you're being told is happening, because those two things are very different right now. And I'll be honest with you, I've been doing this long enough that when I see this many threads converging simultaneously, it makes me genuinely uncomfortable. Not in a sensationalist way. In the way that you feel when you're reading a book and you realize you're already 3/4 through it and nobody has gotten out alive yet. That's the feeling. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, the Iran situation, where do you even start? The ceasefire was always a fiction, and I think we knew that. If you watched my last episode, I was already telling you that the delegation going to Islamabad was not a negotiating team. It was a delivery service. They were delivering an ultimatum wrapped in diplomatic language and calling it talks. And the Iranians, who are not stupid, they understood that perfectly well. So what you're seeing now is both sides performing diplomacy for the cameras, while the military posture on the ground tells a completely different story. Look at the material being moved into the region. We're talking about an absolutely enormous logistical footprint that does not look like a ceasefire maintenance operation. It looks like pre-positioning. And here's what I keep asking myself. If the ceasefire is real, why are you sending that much equipment? You're not sending 3 carrier groups and that volume of ordnance into a region because you expect things to calm down. You're sending it because you're getting ready for the next phase. And the Iranians know this. That's why their foreign minister is out there talking about new battlefield cards. What does that mean? Is he talking about hypersonics? Is he talking about something proxy related in Iraq or Syria? Or is he actually signaling something nuclear adjacent? I genuinely don't know, and anybody who tells you they know for certain is lying to you. What I do know is that the gap between what officials are saying publicly and what the intelligence picture actually looks like has never been wider in my lifetime. And I've been watching this stuff for a long time. Let me unpack something here that's crucial to understanding the asymmetry we're dealing with. The Iranian leadership has a completely different information ecosystem than we do. They're receiving briefings on Russian weapons transfers, on the scope of Chinese intelligence sharing, on the actual state of drone manufacturing across the region that we simply don't have access to. And when you combine that with their historical experience of being isolated, sanctioned, and encircled, you get a decision-making framework that looks fundamentally different from what Western analysts are assuming. They're not negotiating in a world where they believe the current order persists. They're negotiating in a world where they think that order is already collapsing, which changes everything about how you read their signals. Their defense minister's recent statements about acceleration programs aren't bluster. They're not empty rhetoric designed for domestic consumption. They're commitments being made to constituencies that are international and non-state. They're signaling partners, and those partners are paying attention. The proxy networks in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, they're all receiving updated guidance, and they're all being positioned. The sophistication of this coordination is something that people in the media are failing to capture because it requires understanding how information actually moves through these non-traditional networks. It's not Twitter. It's not official statements. It's encrypted channels. It's direct communications through trusted intermediaries. And it's happening at a pace that conventional intelligence analysis can't keep up with. Okay, so let's talk about oil, because I think this is the mechanism through which this whole thing becomes your problem personally. not an abstraction. Your problem. The physical price of oil right now is dramatically divorced from what you see quoted on financial screens. And I talked about this last week, but I want to go deeper because I think people still aren't grasping the implications. When the Strait of Hormuz goes from fully operational to functionally closed, you're removing somewhere between 8 and 13 million barrels per day from global supply. Now the world uses about 100 million barrels a day, so that sounds like maybe 10%, which doesn't sound catastrophic. But here's why that framing is completely misleading. Oil markets don't work like a light switch where you just dim it by 10% and everything gets 10% more expensive. They work like a pressure system. When you remove that much supply that fast, the price doesn't go up linearly. It goes non-linear. And the countries that are most dependent on Persian Gulf supply, which is basically most of Asia, they don't have the luxury of waiting around for alternative routes to spin up. They're paying whatever it takes to secure physical barrels right now, and that premium is already enormous. I've seen figures suggesting the spread between paper oil and physical oil is the largest it's ever been in recorded history. Larger than during COVID. Larger than during the 2008 crisis. And yet the paper price is being held down. Why? I think you already know why. The same reason markets always get managed in moments of geopolitical stress. Because if the paper price reflected physical reality right now, you'd see a level of panic that would be very difficult to contain. So there's an active effort to suppress the signal. And that can only work for so long before the physical reality overwhelms it. We're close to that point. I think we're very close. The Indian energy sector is particularly exposed here, and they know it. India is desperately trying to maintain a balance between Washington and Moscow and Beijing all simultaneously while their energy imports are under genuine stress. They've been increasing their Russian oil purchases precisely because they need diversification away from Hormuz-dependent supply. But that creates strategic vulnerabilities in their relationship with the United States. And you can see the evidence of this tension in their public statements, which are getting more carefully parsed by the day. They're trying not to alienate any major power while securing the raw materials their economy needs. That's an impossible position in the long term. Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, all facing similar pressures. And then you've got Europe, which supposedly has weaned itself off Russian energy, but is still deeply vulnerable to any major disruption in Middle Eastern supply chains. The renewable transition narrative that everyone's been sold isn't actually a near-term energy transition. It's a medium to long-term aspiration layered on top of a global economy that still runs on the stuff that comes out of the ground. That gap between the aspiration and the reality is where the actual risk lives. Now, China. I need you to really pay attention here because I think China is the wild card that most analysts are dramatically underweighting. So publicly, Xi Jinping calls for the strait to reopen. He phones the Saudi crown prince. He makes all the right diplomatic noises. And Western analysts read that as China playing peacemaker. I think that is a fundamental misreading of what's happening. Remember after the Alaska summit, I said right here on this channel that what you saw on that stage bore no relationship to what was agreed in the room. And then look at what happened. Russia escalated significantly within weeks. So what happens post-Trump, post-Xi summit? What do you think that picture looks like? Because I'll tell you what I think it looks like. I think it looks a lot like a China that has received enough strategic clarity about American intentions in the Middle East to make some very consequential decisions about Taiwan. And they're not going to telegraph those decisions. You know that rule from the 48 laws of power. The one about fearing the person who speaks least. Putin doesn't post on social media. Xi doesn't post on social media. Kim Jong-un doesn't post on social media. There's a reason for that. And meanwhile, Trump is on Truth Social at 2 a.m. posting about Operation Midnight Hammer. I mean, strategically, what are we doing? The Chinese fishing boat exercise I mentioned last episode, the one where you could see thousands of vessels aligning into what looked like a coordinated barrier formation on the AIS transponder data, that's not a coincidence. That's a rehearsal. And the scale of what China can mobilize when it decides to move is something that I think most people in the West genuinely cannot conceptualize because we have no modern reference point for it. Think about the Olympics opening ceremony, the precision of it, the sheer human scale. Now apply that logic to a military operation. Okay, and I want to bring this back to something that I think is really important because I get messages all the time from people saying that I'm being alarmist or that I'm connecting dots that don't connect. And look, I'll always grant that confirmation bias is real. I've said that many times. But when you have infrastructure fires occurring above the statistical baseline across 6 continents simultaneously, when you have a paper oil market that's being actively decoupled from the physical market on a scale never seen before, when you have a ceasefire that both sides are already publicly undermining while privately moving military assets, when you have China doing large-scale naval and civilian vessel coordination exercises in the Taiwan Strait, and when you have Russia claiming it's producing 1,000 drones per day, but only deploying a fraction of that, which means they're stockpiling for something, when you have all of those things happening at the same time, the parsimonious explanation is not that these are all separate, unrelated events. The parsimonious explanation is that we are watching the early stages of a coordinated global realignment that is going to resolve itself in a way that is going to be very disruptive to the current order. I don't enjoy saying that. I actually hate saying it, but the data pattern is what it is. And the job of this show, as far as I'm concerned, is to give you the honest read on what the data pattern looks like, not the reassuring version, because the reassuring version is available everywhere. You don't need me for that. What you need me for is to sit here and tell you what I actually see when I look at this map and go through these numbers. And what I see right now, as of this episode, is a world that is considerably closer to a major escalatory event than the official narrative is prepared to admit. Pakistan is reportedly finalizing its own quiet defense consultations with both sides. The Islamabad talks are in genuine jeopardy. J.D. Vance hasn't left Washington yet. And Iran's chief negotiator is out there on social media talking about tables of surrender. That's not the language of a side that's about to compromise. And frankly, given what they've been through, I'm not sure I blame them for holding that line. What happens next is going to depend on whether somebody in the room in the next 72 hours has enough political courage and enough technical knowledge to actually thread this needle. And based on the delegation compositions I've been looking at, I'm not holding my breath on that one. And that's all for today's update. If you found this video helpful or informative, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want to stay ahead with the latest updates, insights, and breaking developments, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about this situation? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now, Africa.